All right. So case number one, probably one of my favorite things to talk about as a marketer is a rebrand. It's an opportunity to figure out where a company is going, where they've been in the past. How do you bridge the gap? So I'm excited to talk about this case. Go ahead, take it away.
Sure. So I arrived at this company, and as part of the whole interviewing and, joining on process, I knew that we were going to rebrand the company. And that's an interesting place to be. Like, as you think about your kind of, 4 or 5 weeks before you join, it's like, all right, I'm trying to figure out names, but your team have no concept that this is about to be unloaded
Yeah.
upon them. And so let me kind of step back and explain, why rebrand a company in the first place? I think that's the first question. It's not something that we as marketers should take lightly. It's not trivial, and it's a really important change. And so the original name of this company was the appropriate name when the company was founded back in 2001. And it had connotations around what the product did at the time. But unfortunately for the company, the two terms changed distinctly over time. And they became less about the audience that the company served, which was finance, office of the CFO teams, and actually became about IT teams. And so as teams were talking and, both in sales, marketing, everyone was talking about the company name, people would say, hang on, how does this relate to what we do, right? Like it just didn't serve its purpose to identify with the audience that we primarily sold to. And so as we thought about accelerating the growth of the company, we realized that we needed a different name because there was cognitive dissonance for an audience member when they first heard it. They're like, hang on, you shouldn't be speaking to me. You should be speaking to my IT team or my tech ops team or someone else, right? Because the market had shifted those two terms. And so that was the primary reason for changing. And so as we then looked at new names, it was very much, okay, well, who do we serve? So you have to go through that whole exercise of who do we serve and where could we go in the future so that we don't have to do this again? And then as you think about naming a company, right now you want the .com to be available, so that limits your choices. You want the .com to be reasonably priced, so that limits your choices. And finally, you want the name to really either easily identify with your customers or be something that they can get on board quickly with. And so this rebrand took place in late 2019 and was kind of delivered in 12 weeks. So that's a whole other podcast, I think.
That's a separate case study on why that happened. My God, the madness.
Yeah, it was pretty chaotic, but it worked. Then the challenge is, how do you get that new name and transition what brand equity you did have from one name to another name and all the tactics and changes that go along with that? It's not a trivial effort, as I said at the start, and especially with a company that has a long history, right? We had huge amounts of content, huge amounts of, third-party assets out there, partners that you need to enable. So it was a really big transformation.
So I'm going to jump into the 12 weeks, right? That's probably got to come from the CEO down. Someone just said, hey, this is when it's got to happen. What was driving the timing of it? Was it a decision that just was put off forever and you said, hey, it's got to get done? Tell me more about the 12 weeks.
It was definitely CEO and joint, right? One of the things that I've certainly learnt in my career is the longer that you allow something to take, the even longer it's going to take. And so one of the marketing tactics that I use with a lot of projects is to set a really aggressive timeline. You'll be amazed at how much you can get done with your team, through your partners, with an aggressive timeline. And often that leads to, okay, we find all the stress points in the project really quickly and can solve them really quickly and then actually get down to the higher value work. So I'm not saying a rebrand is low value, but that could be something that just lingers on in the company for 9, 12, 18 months. I've seen it happen at plenty of other organizations. When I hear companies rebrand, I say, how long did that take? And the answer is generally in terms of, okay, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months. And that's a huge burden for a team to be carrying for a long period of time, right? When you think about, oh, well, we're going to rebrand, everyone just feels like they're in limbo. And the goal was aggressive to get it done quickly, but also we didn't want the team to feel like they were in limbo for long periods of time. And there was a kind of forcing function, a compelling reason to do that, which was our annual company kickoff, the first time everyone had actually been together at the company. And as they walked in, they saw the old brand on all the banners and everything like that. And then as they left the keynote, they saw new banners
Oh,
and
that's great. That's
new
great.
swag and things like that. So it was representative of a wider transformation.
That's a nice little idea too to because so often a rebrand you sell internally first and then you go externally. All right, so now I'm curious about rebranding. I've done a bunch of these and I'm always intrigued because every company has a different approach. Some are so brand design centric, others are more messaging centric. Some are just customer obsessed centric, like they just want to talk to customers all the time. So what was kind of the muse for you to do the rebrand?
Yeah, I think it was probably more so customer centric in the name, customer centric in the way that underpinned a reposition. So brand narrative underpinning that. So very, very customer centric, with the exception of we weren't guided by customers into the design, into the look and feel and, color schemes and all of those things that go along with it. So the brand was built around and centered around customers and what we deliver for them and kind of how they want to think, feel, do. But we didn't use them as the pillars of, hey, do you like this or not? Right. We were going
Yeah.
too fast to even do that. So at the late stages, when we did have brand designs and I'd say almost final concepts, it was more informing some early stage customers about, not early stage customers, but early in the process, it was informing some select customers that this is what we were doing, got their feedback. But we weren't really taking that into, okay, we're going to now really change what we've done. We're very confident in our approach, our design methodologies. And so the design changed very distinctly, brand changed very distinctly, obviously a brand new name, customer driven in terms of that was the lens that which we looked everything through. So whether that was typography, fonts, color palette, voice and tone, all of that completely customer centric. But the actual visual design elements were built around where we wanted to go with the brand, not where customers thought we
Yeah.
should go.
Okay. Did you guys do this in-house? Did you have external help at all? How did it happen?
Yeah, we definitely had external help. I don't think you can do this type of thing in-house in 12 weeks. So we worked with an agency out of Austin that I'd worked with prior to help do that and meet those aggressive timelines. And they really facilitated a lot of the conversation around, where should our voice and tone be? Where should our palette sit? Why? And very much a great facilitation process, but all the decisions were
Yeah.
made internally.
Okay. I'm kind of amazed that sounds like it happened in the time frame. I think a lot of companies I've either worked at or with approach it with, yep, we're doing a big sprint. We're going to be nimble, agile, and all of a sudden our 12 weeks turns into 30 weeks because decisions weren't made or, ooh, maybe we should talk to some key customers and, ooh, now we have to listen to that feedback. So how were you able to stay on track? Was it just a clear vision by a couple of people or what happened?
Yeah, we didn't get lost in consensus, I think is one of the big aspects of
Yeah.
that, making that timeline work. We're also very clear about what we wouldn't get done early on. For example, product URLs can take a long time to change inside of a release path and things like that, product documentation. There was a very, very distinct meeting around what's in scope, what's out of scope, and what are we okay to have as kind of phase 2, phase 3. So end of phase 1 was all the external brand change, internal brand change, things like swag, all the other stuff, right? But what was in phase 2 and phase 3 was things like long tail assets that we knew that we needed to rebrand, but it was okay, actually. You've got to be comfortable with that type of scope to say, it's going to be okay if people still see us as this old name. We weren't
Yeah.
completely trying to ditch the old name and say that company's, no longer here. We wanted to build upon that. And so therefore it's okay to have some assets that are, not in the new brand per se. So that's number one, was scope, really defining the scope, and then ultimately removing the consensus. So it was a very clear decision-making process, daily stand-ups, working directly. So it was myself and the CEO that were really making the decisions and very clear about which decisions he was making and which decisions I was making. And that really helped. It has helped that we'd worked together in the past. So that also accelerated some of the decision-making.
Yeah. All right, so every rebrand I've worked on, there's at least, I don't know, 10 dramatic elements of the project. So share one or two of those things where, where you thought things were going pretty smooth and then all of a sudden, whack, you just get hit by something.
Yeah, it's specifically logo, I would say. And we had finalized effectively the core elements of the logo, and we have a logo mark and a word mark locked up together. The logo mark was solidified and the word mark was solidified, but putting the two together went through some very last minute changes at the point where you need to start printing things, right? Like, as I said, we were doing things for an on-site company event, and we're up against some printing deadlines, and just getting the visual balance right, like, alignment, center alignment of things. You're like, oh, it's perfectly center aligned, but optically it wasn't,
Yeah.
right? And so going through that kind of final little process took 2 to 3 days longer and meant, delays on printing and things like that. And, you start rushing the job and rushing print jobs, but it was worth it in the end, because as you look back now, you're like, actually, we made the right decision to slow down for those 2 to 3 days. The logo, as you look at it now, compared, I've still got some of the old, concept art still around the office, and you're like, yeah, we made the right call.
Yeah.
But it's hard to think about at the time. You're like, it's just alignment, it's center aligned, and mathematically, I know it looks fine,
Yeah.
but there's just that visual indicator that something doesn't sit quite right.
It's amazing when designer I worked with a long time ago she showed me the exercise of mathematically even, aligned, but then visually off. And
Yeah.
it's been a great lesson, because you think it's as simple as just, oh, we'll just set it up the right way and we're good. It has nothing to do with it. It's about the other elements around in the palette that you're working with.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
it's always fascinating.
And our eyes plays tricks on us. They don't know mathematical alignment like a screen does.
Yep. Yeah, true. And that there's, I feel like we've gotten to a place finally where logos are being designed for screens first. Screen was always an afterthought. And I think one of the really interesting logos I had seen, maybe this is 10 years ago, I forget the name of the brand, but it was a sound oriented company. So it was either a speaker or some type of online music platform. And they designed their logo so that when you scrolled on the screen, there were little pulses that came out of the logo, little sound waves. And I was like, it's just a great execution of a logo for a digital company.
Yeah.
But that wasn't always the case. People kind of looked at digital as the afterthought once the people who used to do print or TV would be done with the rebrand. So
well, yeah, I think it's the advent of the digital designer first, and then so then you think about things like color, right? You can pick whatever color you want, but how does that look on a color swatch printed on a quarter zip, or all of those different elements? And I don't sit here and say we got everything right. There's plenty of times where the color doesn't sit right on a particular design, and because we did it in 12 weeks, we have to live with that.
Yeah.